seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Okay, we got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
Live from historic Pearson Field, in cooperation with Aero Maintenance Flight Schools, the pilotintheclassroom.com presents the third Saturday Safety Seminar.
All right, well, welcome. Thanks for coming. Such a nice day too, right? I figured we were going to be bad weather and everybody would want to come and get out of the rain. But thanks for being here. The first couple minutes will be just a little clunky because I have to kind of go back and forth as this is being live streamed. But this is understanding flight ops around Pearson. As I like to say, the oldest operating airport in the nation, but College Park disagrees, so we keep that rivalry along. But I figure that the more times I say that, the truer it will be, right? So anyways, thanks for being here. I know this is a pretty popular topic. Some housekeeping items first. Sign in. If you didn't get a chance to sign in, please do that. If you didn't pre-register, make sure I can read your email correctly, or you can go to my website afterwards and use the Microsoft forms. Restrooms are just right around the corner, and then emergency exits. There's a door here with stairs going down, or go down the other stairs that you came up, and in case of an emergency, we'll meet out in that grass area away from the fuel tanks. Also like to thank our sponsor today, Aero Maintenance. As you guys have been noticing, it's getting a nice little new carpet and facelift, and there's some nice new artwork down in the hallway. So, and afterwards, Aero Maintenance is putting on a barbecue for us. So, and I always say, I'm so excited to be doing the third Saturday safety seminar again, and then it's like a 2-year pause. We were talking about it the last time I did one, and then shortly afterwards I was back in school for 2 years doing my administrative credential. But we want to start doing these probably on a quarterly basis and on the third Saturdays. So this is our pitch for some people who might be watching up north. We partner with Green River as a Part 141 provider, and we have a lot of benefits here flying out of Pearson. We get some complex airspace, one of them which we are going to focus on today. But we're also just a 5-minute flight, right, out to the practice area. You can get in, get out of here, get going. It's non-towered. And then we have proximity to short fields, soft fields. It's a good training environment down here at Pearson. As you'll hear me say a lot, Pearson pilots are proficient pilots. We have to be, right? Because of the uniqueness of our airspace. So who am I? I'm Brig Williams. I recognize a lot of faces here. It's good to see everybody. But my background is that I am a professional educator. I work for Vancouver Public Schools. but I'm also a certified flight instructor, and I work here in Aero Maintenance. I'm also a member of the FAST team. We have some other FAST team members here today. And the FAST team, right, we're just trying to make our pilots fly safer and longer, right? And that's kind of our job. We're representatives, so I don't work for the FAA, right? I'm not here to help. And I am also one of the Wings Pro. We have another Wings Pro here, and also a Drone Pro, which I'm hoping to do some more community outreach for us. So keep an eye out for that one. We'll probably be doing a drone seminar here at Aero Maintenance pretty soon. And more importantly, I'm just passionate about Pearson, right? This is just home. I feel at home about midfield, right, on downwind. That's my happy place, right? And just when I'm there, the historic nature of the field, and we have just a lot of great pilots here. So it's great today for me to start to share about why we're here. And that's to better understand the flight school flight ops. We're going to enhance safety in the Pearson Field Special Flight Rules area by knowing how the flight school operates. And hopefully pilots will utilize, have better utility of the airspace and of the local area. This is a different presentation than the one that's online about the ESFRA, okay? That is kind of by the book, by the, the Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 14, Part 93, I think it's like 123 or something like that, that defines our airspace. That is what the regulations say. Today is how do we operate that as a flight school, okay? So I'm not here to tell anybody how to fly, but I do want you to understand how the majority of the flight operations are happening here on the field. So to kind of ground our thinking today, I think this is an underutilized tool with GA pilots. Give me a thumbs up if you have heard of this before. All right. For my students or the pilots who are looking for a new certificate, if you look at the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards, it basically follows this format, right? The first thing that they're going to test you on is being the pilot, and then they're going to talk about the requirements of the aircraft, and then you're going to talk about weather, and then the external pressures is to actually go out there and do the flight maneuvers, right? So I train my students to go through PAVE. But I really want you to be always thinking about the pilot, am I ready to go? Is my aircraft ready to go, right? Could I pass a ramp check if I need to? And what's happening in the environment? And today we're really focusing on that environment and some of the external pressures that our environment puts onto us. How about the 5 Ps? Give me a thumbs up if you use the 5 Ps. This is another one that I teach my students. In every phase of flight, you should be running through the 5 Ps. Now, the FAA, if you look at it, they do it as a will. Sometimes they move passengers around in a different area. But this one works better for me. The pilot, am I ready to go, right? Is the plane ready to go? Am I on the plan, or do I have a plan? And then is my programming set? How many people are flying with non-steam gauged equipment on their panels nowadays? Oh man, that's a gotcha. I know it's gotten me a few times. So is the programming ready? Is the frequencies ready? And then lastly, if you have passengers, are the passengers briefed? Are they doing what they need to do? So kind of keep that in mind all the time and as we're going through the seminar today, think about PAVE and think about the 5 Ps. So pre-flight. I know we want to jump right into the airspace, but our pre-flight for our flight students and for our customers, right, require a little bit more than the walk around. This is a personal pet peeve of mine, right? I ask, okay, did you do the pre-flight? Yeah, I did. I checked the airplane's ready to go. We got full fuel. Great. I'm like, no, the pre-flight. Right? Have you done the 5 Ps? Have you checked weather? Do you know what's happening? You know, do you have a flight plan? Have you checked NOTAMs? Have you checked NOTAMs all throughout the route of flight? And then we have a dispatch that all of our customers and students have to fill out that has the route of flight. It has fuel planning, tells us where you're going to get fuel if your flight's over longer than 3 hours. And so have you done all those calculations? Have you looked at your performance charts? And then lastly, especially here at Pearson, do you really understand what the wind is doing? Why is Portland arriving one way and our flag is pointing another way, or our ASOS is saying something, right? We need to really balance what the wind is doing to safety of our aircraft, but also as much as possible try to go with the flow of traffic with PDX. So fuel. At our flight school, we do things to limit this one fuel incident a day in the United States. That's an amazing figure. Somebody goes off and runs out of fuel. They have contaminated fuel. They go off with a fuel cap missing, right? There's always one incident a day dealing with fuel management, right? So our instructors have to check fuel now. Even if the student has done it, that's one of our things that we have to do is visually inspect fuel before we get in that aircraft. Because as a pilot at Pearson, we never want to have to use runways 14. Anybody landed on runway 14? Well, yeah, it's runway 14 is a joke. It's highway 14. Yeah. But yeah, you bet. So if you were here when it was 20, you've seen the magnetic drift. But anyways, we want to limit that. All flights have to have half fuel, right? So, and then if it's a solo student, full fuel. Doesn't matter if they're even flying in the pattern, full fuel. And then flights over 3 hours, we require a fuel stop. You can talk to our owner, Bill Gall, about this. He has a very specific reason why, because Cessna's run out of fuel at a very consistent rate. And so after 3 hours, you better be getting fuel. Dispatch. How many of you let me see here. How many are airplane owners or in a club? All right, this is awesome. I love this question that I'm going to ask now. How many of you use a dispatch? Okay, so I know some, especially on if you're in a club. Our dispatch always requires the route of flight. And this is a pet peeve. I got a lot of pet peeves. We'll be talking about this. I figured less people would come if the seminar was on Brig Williams' pet peeves. I'll see a dispatch that says the North Practice Area. That's a lot of territory, right? Your dispatch should be bounded by navigable items on a sectional chart. Nav aids, airports, those types of areas. And also we require fuel calculations. So measured fuel with added fuel with our reserves of 45 minutes, that's standard. Even though legal day VFR is 30, we require our flights to have 45 minutes of reserve when it gets back. And why is this? Well, it's not really for us to know where our students are going. Is that in case if those students don't come back or the aircraft doesn't come back, we have a way to tell CAP, start looking in this area. And then the fuel calculation is not only you as a pilot and one of those requirements, but if they don't find you in that search area, right, where could you have gone elsewhere and for how far, right? That creates that radius if we know how much fuel. So if you're hung up upside down in a tree in our forests around here, and you were like, gosh, I really didn't do a good fuel calculation, right? It becomes important stuff, right? Those little things matter when you need it most. So those of you who have your own airplanes, how will people know? So flights over 50 nautical miles require a filed and activated, this is the important part, activated flight plan for our flights. How many people regularly use a activated flight plan when you go out? We have to also do this at night. I got yelled at one time. You guys remember Clue? Clue was awesome. And he said, "Hey, Brig, how you doing? Saw that you had a night flight last night." "Yeah." He said, "You didn't activate your flight plan." "Ooh, you're watching." "Yeah." And he told me the reason why. The tower has no obligation to call in search and rescue. How many of us never tell Pearson Advisory that we're done with pattern work, right? If they don't ever hear from you again, they're assuming you're on the ground. So if you're flying at night and you don't end a flight plan, who knows that you got home? Nobody's watching out for you. So make sure somebody is always watching out for you. ADS-B, all of our airplanes have ADS-B. Now we can watch when solo students go off, right, for their long cross country. We can now watch them on FlightAware, which is fantastic.
Hey, Rick? Yeah, just a question. You know, flight plans are typically from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, what do you file for a route and such, if it's just going to be pattern work or night pattern work?
Yeah. Yeah, I when I personally do it, I do here, the battleground VOR back to here, but then in the remarks I say that I'm doing pattern work. And if I say I'm doing pattern work, I stay in the pattern, right? And that's very specific. But because back in the days that didn't matter, but with like ForeFlight and FlyQ, our electronic flight bags, you need that other point there. All right. Weather and NOTAMs. How many people are checking NOTAMs regularly? True story. True story. I was a new PPL. Always was checked NOTAMs religiously. We always had them printed out at the front desk, right? Go there and check them. The one day I didn't check it. I go out for a joyride. I go over to Scappoose, and I'm making my calls. Man, I'm sounding good. Nobody's in the pattern, and I found out why, because I was on about to turn downwind, and I saw the X's and the construction going on. The one time, and that was a good lesson, right? And some of my commercial students will know, right, that a lot of times I'll ask, "Did you check NOTAMs?" I got my phone out, making sure that there isn't anything weird. You know, with the Troutdale, how many Troutdale pilots are here? Okay, if you know, now it's like, do we have a Class Delta or is it Class Echo, right? You got to check those NOTAMs. So, weather and NOTAMs. Bare minimum with an instructor is 1,500 feet to just do pattern work, and most of us won't do it until it's 18 or 2,000, right? And we'll talk more about our airspace requirements, and 3 miles visibility. For our solo students, 3,000, right? 3,000 foot in order for them to go off in solo. So that can be a limiting factor. Sometimes if we get confidence, we'll give them 2,000 for pattern. We issue a new endorsement. But we have pretty tight runners agreements too with weather minimums. But what are your personal weather minimums? Right? Have you set those? And then have you checked the NOTAMs? I love this day. I know it's a little hard to see with this sunlight coming in, but this is a KVUO day, right? This is totally KVUO. This little fog bank is setting just right on the west end of the field. If you take a look to the east, it was blue skies and not a cloud around, right? But we sat around all day, right? Because that fog just stood there. So we have these up around in our FBO, and how many people have seen these, right? Kind of the same things with on the electronic flight bags. What does this mean? What do these mean?
It's visibilities, like VFR, IFR, marginal.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So what constitutes a green light? Oh, what's VFR?
1,000 direct miles and 5,000 foot helix.
So it's 3,000 feet, 3 miles visibility constitutes a green. What's blue?
Orange.
Below that, down to 1,000.
Yeah, down to 1,000. What's the red? Okay. What's that other like pink color? Yeah. What's that for? Yeah. This is my point. I watch people around sitting, and it's like, oh, Scappoose just turned green. We can go. Everything else is red. I'm like, do you not know how to? Who? By the way, who's this for? Who are these lights for? Is these for VFR pilots? They're instrument pilots. The green tells you that you will be able to come in and do a visual approach. If it's marginal, you're going to need to be on a instrument approach of some type. And then you might be able to break out and, right? The red means that you can come in IFR on a non-precision approach and probably more than likely be able to do a circling to land. If it's limited, you're going to need a precision approach and you still might not be able to get in. These colors are for us to come down through the deck. Not really can we go off and have a VFR flight, right? There's many times where it's green and we don't fly. 3,000 foot, but it's dipping around because of the airports, and then you get over the north practice and it starts to lower because of rising terrain and packing up, right? So with all this modern technology, be careful, really understand what the weather is doing. Don't get bit. As a flight instructor, we've been bit.
Isn't there also this is not an official FAA thing, this is supplemental.
The data's coming in. The data's coming in. Yeah.
But it's still not the place for weather report.
Right, yeah. That's a whole nother weather seminar. So, and then we're getting here. You see that we're kind of going through the phases of flight. Our run-up, right? Here's a couple of things on run-ups. Make sure you're doing a safety briefing. And we have that on our checklist, right? You've had your safety briefing, you're ready to go. Know your rotations and stop distances. I know a couple of years ago I did a loss of control accident, and the Troutdale pilots, right? I'm like, do you guys always hit your spot? If you're not going to land on your spot, do you do a go around? They're like, no, we're at Troutdale. We got all this runway. You know, what happens when you go into woodland, right? So really understand rotation distances, right? We have fields that you can make it to rotation, but if you need to abort at rotation, do you have enough stop distance, right? There's a lot more that I'll do off of 2.6 than I won't do off of 8. Why? I have 800 feet of stopway in the grass if I'm taking off 2.6. I have a 12-foot berm on 8, right? Different types of wind conditions I'll take on 2.6 that I won't take on 8 because I know my rotation and my stop distances. How many of you have been working the pattern? You've talked to advisory, you're on your second, your third lap, you're coming off, you're coming up to the line, and somebody beelines it out of run-up to the hold line and then asks for a complicated clearance. How many people? How many people has that happened to? Yeah, we got honest people here, right? Think about making your advisory calls in the run-up. Now, I know that a lot of times as instructors, we say we're holding short of 2.6 because we're trying to get new student pilots to get some practice with what will happen at a tower, right? But remember, we're in a non-towered airport. We're in advisory. We're in SFRA. If you are asking for some clearances, IFR, and this gets complicated sometimes, or a transition, kind of do that in the run-up circle, right? Don't do it at the line, because there's sometimes where the tower knows that there's like an airplane in the pattern, and they'll hear, oh, we're on final, right? Okay, might be a few minutes before the next person takes off, and they're handling another chore. right? And then somebody sneaks in and takes that line, and they're not ready to take that advisory call, and that other person could have been still flying, right? So just kind of a courtesy thing. And then our airspace. So now what everybody came for, right, is our airspace. I love this. We've all seen this, right? This is what our Class C looks like, right? This is what Class E looks like. This is not accurate. This is not to scale. This is going to be kind of hard to see. You might want to go back on the recording and watch this. This is a 3D model of our airspace. You notice that doesn't even get quite out to the edge, so I wanted you to get some reference. The intersection is the surface area, right? And our airspace lives in that surface area for PDX. It's kind of hard. The next one will be, it's razor thin. It is not like this. The thickness of my laser light is about 2,000 feet. What's pattern altitude at Pearson? Yeah, it's half of that laser light is what we have to fly in. I don't think this is accurate, right? And this makes sense, right? When you think about how long is a statute mile? How many feet? Right? So it doesn't take you, and how wide is a Class Charlie airspace? 4,000, right? But how wide? How wide is the inner circle? 5 miles? Yeah, so 10 miles total, so 20, right? Little razor thin area. So with our Pearson airspace, we have tighter boundaries. It's not like going to a Class E or a Class Gulf airspace, right? We're tight, and everybody's flying the same altitude. We have vertical limits. The margins of error are small. This is why we need to fly predictably. So once again, I'm not telling you this is the letter of the law and this is what you must do. What I'm saying is this is what we teach our students to do, who then become pilots on the field and everything else, right? So let's get into this. So let's talk about departures. Now, once again, if you haven't watched the video about the Part 93 airspace, I always highly recommend watching that once a year. Our SFRA requires attaining local weather and contacting Pearson advisory before departing. Let me reiterate this. There is no provision for radio failure on the ground. Now, people will say, I call them a couple times and I take off. Yeah, okay. They're not going to deviate you unless what? Something happens. You create a go around, right? There's something going on, right? Be respectful of that. If you haven't done the tour, there's just a squawk box, and it's open to everybody, right? It's not a dedicated person in the air. Things are going on, right? We got to be respectful for the commercial operations that are going above us and over to our side. If you have tried repeatedly, you can always try to contact them on the tower frequency, and that way somebody can hear. I do never recommend taking off unless you have made that clearance beforehand. So like I'm doing pattern work, okay, great, you're good now, right? Unless you're going to kind of do something different from there. But,
You said clearance.
well, not clearance, advisory, yeah. Yeah, you have to make contact. Thank you for that.
I do have a question. Where is their antenna receiver physically located?
I don't know, yeah, I'm
Many
sure.
years ago, I tried to contact them on the ground. Couldn't. Low wing plane, antennas down
Yeah.
the belly.
Yeah, sometimes it's as I say, they should, since they can pick up 119, we should be able to get onto the other frequencies. But remember, yes, it's not a clearance, right? But the SFRA does state that you have to make contact. So let's talk about transitions. I know this is one that a lot of people want to talk about. There are no official transitions out of Pearson, right? There is no published transitions. This is just kind of that local knowledge, and we use that terminology, right? If you listen very astutely to the tower, they don't always necessarily read this back to you, right? They use other terms for it. So eastbound is unofficially the North Bank transition. You don't even need to say the North Bank transition. You can say advisory. I need to go to Hood River, and they'll issue a clearance now to go through the Charlie, right? The south is the midfield transition, and we now have a published, what is that, Blazer that goes in. It's a lot more busier now too because of that.
Question.
Yeah.
What is the correct radio protocol if you are taking off from Troutdale with intentions to land here and vice versa?
Whew, you know what? I need to be more educated about that for Troutdale. That's one that I've thought that we probably need to do. Anybody know that? I know some Troutdale Camas folk here.
The answer is it depends. Is Troutdale towered or not, right?
Yeah.
If it's Delta, and then they'll hand you off. Then it also depends, do you want to get here through the Charlie? You do need to contact, recommend 123.77 for the tower on the south bank and 118.7 on the north, but call them up. When Richard Kennington is here, he has advised, go ahead, if you're close in, go ahead and contact Portland Tower, tell them your intentions, rather than go approach and then go to tower.
Yeah.
I only ask because I trained at Troutdale, and to get here, we would ask for a northbound transition, but that was westbound, and I don't know.
It's, yeah, so it's still the north, we call it North Bank. Yeah. And basically the North Bank is don't fly over the river, right? It's everything above. A lot of people think that they need to be really on the south edge or the north edge of the Columbia, but anything just north of the river is that. Oftentimes I'm following Burton Bridge Creek on the backside of the hospital there, right? And that's still considered that north. So what does that look like? These are both of the transitions. Doesn't matter if you're departing 2-6. If you depart 2-6, you're going to depart off the downwind. If you're departing 8, it's straight up and off you go. 8's a lot faster, right? And then once you kind of hit that midfield, fly directly over the tower, right? Unless they tell you otherwise. And then it's that simple, right? Yep.
Can you remind me, when you're contacting Pearson Advisory and you like that midfield transition, you can ask for it. Will they give you a discrete squawk code?
Yeah. Yeah. So how that works, the next slide, perfect, right? So make that call from the run-up, right? You know, I usually always do it with a request because the request tells them that there might be some coordination that they will be doing, and they might not, even though they can give you the advisory to like fly the pattern or just depart, if it is going to require some more coordination, just let them know. And they'll, hey, say your request. And then just ask for it in plain language, right? And then they will issue a squawk code and a tower frequency. Here's the key though. Give a destination, right? If you're going out to Hood River, say you're going to Hood River, right? If you're going down to Aurora, say you're going to Aurora, right? Because the way that coordination works, they have to have a destination, right? And so it just makes their life a lot easier if you have it in there. Now, if you decide to change your mind, you can change your mind, right? But you'll be working with ATC and approach at that time. Downwind departures for the transition from 2-6 is permitted, right? So we'll talk about that. How many people went to the Northwest Aviation Conference? Anybody get to see Thomas Baker's non-towered ops? Fantastic. I know, Phil, you had some good presentations there too. But you know, downwind departures, we're going to talk about those, right? But for the transition, that's about the only way you can do it is off the downwind. So that's permitted. Upwind departure is permitted too. Just know that you're going to be needing to contact that tower quickly, so you're talking with them. Always brief your departures, right? Make sure you understand the particulars of the SFRAs. Avoid the Columbia River, right? Just avoid it until you are out from underneath our airspace and well into the undershelf, and we'll talk about that here in a second as well. No higher than 700 feet over the runway or the extended center line, right? Now, if you're on a transition, you're going to now be in contact with the tower, and that no longer applies, right? But this becomes, I think, sometimes an issue with higher performance aircraft, right, that are blasting out quickly, like off of 8. And at 700 feet, you're almost out of our airspace, right? And then you need to get off of center line. This is for wake turbulence and for TCAS avoidance, right? That's 700 feet. So kind of keep that in mind. On a go around, I typically like climb to 5 until I get established, and then no higher than 700 feet. And that's when we typically turn our crosswinds anyways.
See a break?
Yep.
Could you go back to slide for a minute? One suggestion there when transitions are coming in is expect tower will ask your type.
Yep.
They're managing a lot of hardware over there.
Yeah. That's a good point. Know your routes. I know years ago, Teresa Nelson did a wonderful kind of like, where could you go in case of an emergency? And we've had a lot of construction since that seminar, right? A lot more power lines, a lot more buildings off of 2.6. Know your outs. Think about it. What are you actually going to do? Runway 8, by the time you're at 1,000 feet, your best option might actually be in front of you and not behind you now with all the construction, right? Typically, you're not, you're close to 1,000 feet almost by the time you're out of our airspace, right? Oh, I'm sorry, 2.6. Yes, I'm sorry, thank you, I'll make that correction. Always have to get an error, right? Be hesitant to say I'm going to ditch in the Columbian. I have a lot of people tell me that. I was a dive instructor years ago. I know how cold this water is. I know what upset recovery will look like in the water. And without the proper equipment, the training, the life support equipment, your best option is try to get to Hayden Island in the clearing, right? Or land on top of a building, right? Get wrapped up in a power line. Have you seen those airplanes that get wrapped up? It's one heck of a rescue, but it's a rescue. It's not a recovery.
I've looked it off with the west runway here. There's a railway yard slightly north of the center line. Is that empty enough that you could probably dump a plane in?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, if you're losing an engine, you're
Yeah.
going to go down someplace. I think I'd rather go down in a mostly empty railway yard than I would the river.
Yeah.
Because the first thing you're going to do is flip over anyway.
Yeah. So I just say that. I hear that a lot. But really take some time to think about that. Maybe we'll do another safety briefing on that. That's personal preference. If I will recommend, if you have not watched the latest, it was about 2 years ago, AOPA did the impossible turn, right? And the thing is that the lower the performance of your aircraft, the better your chances of returning back to the airport. Higher performance aircrafts, Moonies, Bonanzas, things like that, might not be an option, right? So really kind of understand, and then lastly, train with a CFI, okay? Runway 26, right? Can't be any easier. Track center line to about until you get to the I-5. Those of you who have flown with me, you're always hearing 500 I-5. Right, that's my goal, that I know that I'm getting good performance. If I'm at least 500 feet by the time I cross over the I-5, things are looking good. By the time you get to the I-5 to avoid the river, you're coming off of center line anyways. If you actually look at our center line, it will put you out over the river, right? So you got to bend and keep north. Avoid overflying Smith Tower, that big round building. Esther Shore Park, which is right behind the big round building. right? If you are abeam the Expo Center, everybody knows where the Expo Center is? You are well clear of the Smith Tower and Esther Shore Park, and normally by that time you're at 700 feet and you're turning crosswind if you're in the pattern. If you're departing, go straight out, and we'll talk about that. But please, don't overfly the stockade, right? Don't overfly the park in general. You know, just know those areas where they don't want us to fly over.
Sorry, I'm not super familiar with the area here. I don't know where Smith Tower or Esther Shore Park are.
Yeah, Smith Tower, when you look out here, it looks like the old, a Tower Records building. It's a round building, about, I don't know, 15 stories or something like that. It's a senior citizen housing project, and then Esther Shore Park always has like Saturday market. So,
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Watch my video.
We, on the next one here, avoid crosswind departures off of 2.6. We'll show you how we want our students and our customers to depart out of the area, and you'll see why this becomes an issue. Remember, we talked about how we have vertical limits, we have a tighter airspace, and everybody's just kind of in this predictable manner. 2.6s really creates, crosswind off of 2.6 can create some issues. So if we're departing off of 2.6, right, we're going to follow that, and then we teach our students to go to the south side of the lake and then go around the lake to get out there. Class Charlie starts at 1,800 feet out in that area. And so that gives you now a little bit more room to navigate. A 2.6 crosswind departure will cut you off right on that 45, right? And that's why, you know, when you actually read non-towered operations, there's what? There's two ways to depart out of a pattern. Straight ahead or 45 degrees off the crosswind, right? So even that would be better than a crosswind departure to the north, right? So kind of keep that in mind. That, I tell you what, you get a solo student and they've had a rough flight and you come in and now somebody's departing off the 2.6 and they're trying to find that other aircraft, it creates a lot more issues. I've had one do a crosswind departure when we were landing the opposite way. Came right, and then if you are coming head to head with an aircraft, what does the right-of-way rules say? Which way are you supposed to go?
The right.
Yeah. Yeah. I went right, he went left. I recognize that voice. Oh, yeah. So did the tower, so did about 6 other different pilot people. I think that guy was having a bad day in retrospect. So anyways, you'll see that we'll talk about arrivals here, but you can kind of see why. I will say that right here at that kind of that northwest area of the lake, that is always a great place to find another aircraft. And now we have a Fly-It is the other flight school over in Camas is now coming right this way to beeline it home. So this area, heads up, right? Heads up.
Question, on the departure off of 2.6, is the recommendation to stay at 700 feet AGL all the way out to the edge of the shelf of the Charlie?
No.
There?
Mm-mm. No, 2.6, as I said, you know, when you get up and you get past the I-5, you should be around about 500 feet. You got to turn anyways to stay in that area. And once you're kind of clear of Esther Shore Park and you're not flying over the river, you're off of centerline, climb up to 1,000 feet. There's those power lines, and then there's the settling tank ponds is the kind of that visual reference that you're out of that airspace. Go ahead and climb up. ATC has asked us, though, that this area right here by the confluence, if you guys can keep it down to 1,500. and there's a reason why, and that's for ATC to do in their presentations. But it has to deal with the arrivals, and so you have to understand that our airspace, even if everybody is doing the right thing, can and will trigger a TCAS. It is what it is. So we are always trying to be good neighbors and good partners with PDX to avoid that. So 1,500 feet out here is a nice, safe bet.
So if you trigger a TCAS, what is the response from PDX or any?
Well, it will depend, right? Yeah. So if you're doing something that you weren't supposed to, I'm sure you're going to get a call. We got a number for you to record, and then
does that happen?
From what I understand, and I won't say that I'm an expert or this is it, but we're kind of designed to do 1 TCAS a month. Yeah, it's just the way that it's going to operate, and that's a good thing. That's a very good thing, right? Don't be that person who turns off their transponder, right? Which used to be practice around here, right? Oh, I don't want my transponder on. I don't want to scare them, right? So make sure that we're doing it. Just fly. As I tell everybody else, and I will say it 1,000 times, fly predictably, fly a normal pattern, and you're doing the right thing, right? That's all we can ask. But they've asked us to kind of keep it 1,500 feet out here, which I kind of teach everybody anyways, just because that gives you a little buffer from popping. 300 feet can move quickly, right? We still have that shelf. And then, so I actually like to get out of the shelf, and then what do we have right up here that's not shown? Wildlife reserve, right? That's another challenge. How high do you have to be over the wildlife reserve? 2,000 feet, right? So a lot of times I like to get up, just come straight out, get to 2,000 feet and move over. Talking about Scappoose will be a whole nother training session. I don't even want to go there. Let's talk about runway 8. Crosswind departure turn is greater than 90 degrees. It's just the geometry.
I've got a question about the wildlife refuge.
Yes.
Is that 2,000 feet regulatory or advisory?
That is even more than regulatory. So that is actually through the Department of the Interior. And before the FAA, this was years ago, about 10 years ago, people were like flying over the islands and disturbing the mating habits of this and this bird. And finally, the Interior was prosecuting those pilots. And so that's one of those areas you don't want to bus. You don't want to fly a drone around a fire operation. You don't want to fly over any of the national park area.
All up the coast, too.
All up and down the coast. Make sure you're above those limits. And now with ADS-B tracking, even though they're talking about they're trying to protect our privacy, they have access to that data.
Over that, you have to fly more than 2,000 because it's 2,000 AGL. Right.
Yeah.
So you got to account. So
yeah.
Better off at 25 or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
yep. The things that we have to do to enjoy our freedom to fly, right? Okay. 8. Stay east of the freeway split. This is what we teach our students. So when you're departing off the crosswind, stay east of the freeway until you get to the freeway split. And we'll talk about why here in a second. When you're usually at the Bonneville Power Substation, you're typically out of the SFRA, just barely, right? But that's when you can start going up higher than 1,000 feet. Avoid downwind departures from runway 8, please. Avoid downwind departures off of runway 8. And we'll show you how we teach our flight school. How to navigate that issue. That creates a lot of problem because of our geometry of our airspace and how most arrivals are coming to 8. The most used method for arrival to 8 is the extended base to following the railroad tracks. A downwind departure does not enhance safety, okay? So on 8, our departures. Come up, have that greater than 90-degree turn, right? Get out of the SFRA, and then a lot of people follow Salmon Creek. That's why I told you, watch out. That Salmon Creek is a perfect lineup to get to Scappoose. It puts you on a perfect 45 for runway 15, right? And now we have people arriving, departing, and another flight school using that corridor as well. Freeway split, one of the official reporting points to enter the SFRA is typically once you're past that freeway split, right, and you have a little bit more room to navigate. I recommend everybody to stay on 119 until you get out of that area, right? Little black magic when going over to Scappoose, though, right? I mean, that's sometimes you want to stay on 119, sometimes you want to go to 122.8. Yep.
To your point about staying on 119er, does Pearson Advisory provide any traffic alerts for VFR pilots, or is it hit or miss?
That's yeah. There isn't any official policy. They're not obligated to do that. If they're giving you an advisory, it's not because they're bored, right? Yeah, yeah. When they are telling you an aircraft is coming into land, right? That's just not out as a courtesy, right? They're concerned about something. Yeah, great question. Once out of the SFRA, there's greater spacing. I want you to kind of keep in mind that once we're out of our regulatory airspace, we get a little bit more altitude, we get a little wider space for collision avoidance, right? But keep this in mind. If you need to deviate into the Charlie airspace, talk with advisory, right? Hey, I need to extend my downwind for traffic for 26, and they'll say clear to enter the Charlie, right? Talk with them. Don't try to do, remember, right? We are to follow everything unless what? Right, and for safety, right? So if there's some collision avoidance, perfect example, and I'm going to say it, I'm going to say it very loud on this recording. We have fantastic controllers in our area, fantastic controllers. And I was doing a scenic flight, and it was an intro flight, taking a person up, and they wanted to see their house. Guess where their house was? Right there, right? They were fantastic. They were fantastic, giving me, talking with advisory, the tower, you know, and at the one day we had a lot of traffic there, right? So they're fantastic. So really use them on that.
Could I ask you a clarification? If you're on an extended crosswind after a takeoff from 8 and you're going north-northwest, but you're not out of Pearson airspace yet, and you said if you need to deviate into Portland airspace, let's say you're at 2,500 feet, but as I look at the chart, you're not in Portland airspace until it's 400 at that, unless I'm reading it wrong.
4,000 feet. So this
No,
is
I'm talking about the adjacent.
area out here.
No, over Vancouver, they've got. Oh, I'm sorry. No, yeah, it's their airspace from surface to 4,000.
Yeah.
Okay, now never mind. Yeah.
Except for the cutout for Evergreen, right?
So you still need Pearson advisors to give you clearance. Clearance to get in there. Okay.
Yeah. So just kind of be aware. We've had that a lot where somebody needs to extend their downwind, right? And they might clip a little bit. Just talk with them, right? Don't panic.
So that raises an interesting question. You're outside of the SFRA, but in that 1,800, 4,000 quadrant, you're still on 119. Will they hear you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That gets back to the antenna question.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No. That's yeah. We're going to be fine. The freeway split is that mandatory reporting point, right? So even out here, you'll be able to, and I will. I'm not ashamed to say it. Even if you're out over a daybreak, they're going to let you know. Because I have a double habit of double tapping the flip flop sometimes, and then not looking back at the frequency when I make a radio call. So, yeah. We'll get to the north practice here. Please know your arrival points, right? So we have the confluence, which is kind of the least used, and kind of clearly why. Lake Vancouver is the most popular, but the freeway split is here too, right? So until I'm past that freeway split, I don't change frequencies because I want to know if anybody else is coming in. A lot of times when I personally depart, I come out, there's a kind of a pyramidal mountain out there, if you've ever seen it, and I kind of head right over there, and I kind of follow 50th all the way out when I go, just to kind of avoid the high traffic areas. En route. I was specifically asked to talk a little bit about this, even though it was already in the PowerPoint slide. Years ago, there was a movement to use 122.9 for the practice area. And the logic behind that was because we were over Daybreak, we were over Goheen, we were over Parkside, Camas, right? Best intentions lead to morphs in practices over time. And pretty soon people were using 122.9 to blindly call out that they were in the north practice area. And then a couple of the other airports even farther away than you would think said, what is going on? What is the north practice area? That's not what this frequency is for. So the 122.75 is for the advisory area off of Hillsborough for intensive flight training activity. The FSDO made the decision that is kind of the blanket practice area call, a frequency to use for practice calls, okay? And this gets a little complicated, but this is truly for above airport operations. You're 2,000, 3,000 feet, and you're doing stalls, right? You should be using 122.75 to monitor that other training traffic. Now, there's issues with that, right? A lot of the issues is that not all the traffic is necessarily in training, right? But this should be used especially for company operations, company I mean by our flight students, to be coordinated their training, right? So I'm out over the casino, somebody else is over Daybreak. We might want to be able to communicate that we're out of each other's way. That's 122.75. Use it to enhance safety. Be specific but brief. It's like a talk show up there. One person says something else and then 10 people are going off. North practice, Cessna 347, over the casino, 3,000 stalls, north practice, right? Be specific. North practice, what the heck is that anyways? That could be everything from Camas all the way out to Kelso, right? That's a big spot, a big area. So give a very specific reference. Practice calls does not necessarily ensure collision avoidance nor ADS-B. Why? Not required. Every close call I've ever had was a non-ADS-B aircraft, and typically it's over by Woodland, right? You have those smaller ultra craft like float planes that are out there dogfighting. I don't know. They are, but they're low, right? They're at 500 feet.
Greg, that's also the advisory frequency for tours around Mount St. Helens.
Yes, it is.
And I've been up there doing Mount St. Helens and been yelled at because I'm on the wrong frequency by somebody in the practice area that doesn't know.
Well, yeah. That's one of the problems.
Goes a long way.
Yeah, I know, it does. That's a FSDO problem now. Looking clear, right? Radio cars are best used when company aircraft are in the same area, right? So that we know, yeah.
This north practice area you're talking about from Camas over, that's also the hood for arrival.
Yeah.
I practice up there. The reason I ask is I usually go on flight following for traffic. Is that?
I would never fault anybody, especially if you have your own airplane.
Yes.
Yeah, I would never say not to get flight following.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to
Let them know what you're doing, and they are, yeah, and they'll help you out. you know, they're kind of designed from point-to-point traffic sometimes, but work with them. Mr. Fletcher.
Is it FSDO suggesting that same frequency for the practice area east and south of Troutdale?
My understanding, that's the whole FSDO for the Portland area.
Okay, thank
You take a look at that little magenta line that, right, that kind of bounds the approach area. Use 122.75. So when do we use 122.9? Oh, question.
Sorry, where's Turning Tree at? Everyone.
Could you please let me know when you find out? Yeah.
West of Hillsborough.
Yeah, that's west of Hillsborough. Yeah, yeah. That's in that intensive flight training activity area. 122.9, what is this, multicom, technically?
Yeah.
Yes, multicom, right? Designed for airports without a standard approach, right? You should be using 122.9 when you are going to be operating in that pattern altitude for that airport. But you don't say north practice, right? You will say daybreak traffic, right? Or woodland traffic. Don't use north practice. Make a standard radio call. Daybreak traffic, Cessna 347, 2,000 feet descending from the north, right? So that allows anybody doing operations at daybreak to know, look north and look high, right? I'll be very honest. Daybreak is always my out. It's what I usually use when I pull power on students on an emergency. And I usually preempt it by, hey, take a look at that airport, right? That's daybreak. Look at a great little field. And about 5 minutes later, I'm pulling their power, and they totally forget about daybreak, right? Or woodland traffic, 1,000 feet west of the field. Okay, we do a lot of training over daybreak, and we get low sometimes. When you finally get low, you need to make, what's the regulations when you come into the airport operations area, right? Technically, it starts how far out? 10, right? Then normally a 5, then what's a standard 45 entry? Yeah, 2 or 3 miles, right? And then you're making those calls, right? That's when we use 122.9. When you are going to be a factor to that airport, you should let those pilots know, right? To enhance safety. We do a lot of commercial training out over woodland where we're doing 8s on pylons. Me personally, I wish the FAA would get rid of that maneuver, right? Then we have, I won't, my commercial pilots, they get what I'm talking about. But that airspace is tight. And if you're on a downwind for any of those airports, you're not too far away from where we are doing something. So I want them to know, but I'm not going to say north practice, right? I'm going to tell them where I'm at so that if they can hear me, they're looking for me.
That's Woodland Flats.
Yeah, Woodland Flats, you'll hear that a lot.
Got a question for you. If you're, let's say, coming from the north down into the valley here, and you're on 122.9, let's say you're going into Camas, which they've changed to 122.7, where do you suggest switching?
That's a good question, right? I would have to see what traffic is doing that day, but definitely going into the, I want to probably give everybody heads up that I'm coming into that area. Yeah. All depends if I'm up high doing stalls, right, or if I'm descending to come into land. Did that not answer the question?
Yeah, it's just, as you said, it depends on the day.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of pilot and command decisions, right? Learning to fly is easy. Everybody laughs at me when I say that, right? But learning how to be the pilot in command, that's the hardest thing. It's usually what bites us, except for loss of control accidents. Just don't speak to speak, enhance safety, follow the CFRs. Follow the CFRs and best practices. Okay, arrivals. Checklist should be completed, cabin secured before reporting points. Please, be professional, right? That's when we got to start putting our trays away on a commercial flight long beforehand, right? Our 5 Ps, what are we doing with our passengers, right? This is the time that we're saying we're coming into land, please hold any of your questions, right? If you see traffic, please let me know. Secure your items, get ready. Please do that before you hit those arrival points. Once you make your call into Pearson Advisory is not a time for our heads to be down looking at a checklist. Our airspace is too tight, right? Doesn't take long for two aircrafts going, 90 miles, 100 miles, knots per hour, right, to converge on each other. Attain your weather. That's a requirement. Part of the 93, you have to have weather. I also recommend brief Part 93, pattern altitude 1,000 feet, right? I'm always telling my students, below 1,000, below 1,100, no lower than 1,000. Tight. Why 1,000? Why am I saying no lower than 1,000? It's a developed area, right? Yes, we can go below 1,000 feet for the purposes of landing, but when do we start bringing an aircraft down on a standard pattern? Downwind to base. It's tight. That's why Pearson pilots are proficient pilots. We have good stick and rudder skills because we have to be. We can't be sloppy flying over the city of Vancouver. Winds permitting, follow the flow of PDX. This is what I mean. What is the wind actually doing, right? The tailwind that a 150 can take is a lot less than a Boeing, right? So there are going to be days that we have to land crosswind traffic, right? There's going to be days where we get that south crosswind and sometimes we can't get in on 8. We might have to try 2 to 6. Let advisory know what you're doing, right? Sterile cockpit looking for traffic. When you come up to that reporting point and you're making your call into Pearson Advisory, it's game time. Not a time to chit chat, not a time to be doing other stuff. All of that should be done beforehand. Most arrivals come from Lake Vancouver. It just is habit. We're like homing pigeons, right? Follow the railroad tracks. I've been doing that, I don't know for how long. Follow the railroad tracks. That starts out all out in Woodland, right? Kelso. Come home, follow the railroad tracks, right? Keeps you clear of the wildlife preserve. IFR, I fly railroads. Should be established before entering the Pearson airspace. So standard is for 2-6 is a 3-mile 45 entry, right? Line up, if you take a look at where our airspace starts, it's 3 miles, right, from the center of the airport. I teach people, I don't know if you guys, everybody has their own hacks, but the 2 maintenance hangars out at PDX, when you come out over the lake, if you line up on those, that's bringing you midfield, because can we see Pearson from the lake? Now, you don't even see the field until you're almost on downwind, right? Because of all the traffic in the buildings. And so those maintenance hangars out over at PDX is a good lineup. That's what I always use. Avoid 45 entries that would interfere with the crosswind turn. I can't believe how many times I see people go follow the railroad tracks in. They're past I don't even want to say it, Frito-Lay, because I don't want to hear that again. But then they're coming in, but their 45 is coming into where the crosswind turn is, right, for 2-6, and that's not how we do crosswinds in 45s, right? And stop using Frito-Lay as a reference. Unless somebody's told you where Frito-Lay is, right? You can smell it. It smells delicious. It's not charted. Try to use rail yards. Use 33 miles, right? As a pilot, we know where the center point of an airport should be, and we can draw, hopefully, a 45-degree line out 3 miles to look for traffic. Please, stop using it. So, 2-6, we're coming back in. Following those railroad tracks, right? Boom. It's almost a straight line on that 45, and we come in, and then we're tight. By the way, be careful with north winds on 2-6. You get in that predictable anticipation bias. The next thing you know, you're struggling to get back in on your base turn so you don't cross over the water, right? So kind of know what the winds are doing.
Question?
Yep.
If you're coming from the east, basically go till you get to the 45.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we require our students, our renters, it's in our SOP, to be established, be stabilized by 300 feet. What do we mean by stabilized? That means you can take your hands off the control and you should not get a pitch change. On airspeed, final flap configuration, on center line, stabilized by 300 feet. If not, go around. So, brief message from the FAA safety team. Phil and I were brought on board specifically for loss of control accidents, weren't we? Yes, sir. Yeah. Approach accounts for the second highest number of fatalities in general aviation, with only maneuvering being the number one. And maneuvering is usually very close to the ground, moose stalls, right? Coyote stalls, those types of accidents. Approach is what gets us. I know that we have to teach power off 180s, right? But I see a lot of people coming in with higher performance aircrafts, cutting the corners, hot dogging it in, and that's what can lead to a very bad day at any airport if we're not stabilized. So, the loss of control work group found all these things to be the causal factors of loss of control accidents. The second top one, right, is unstable approaches. You'll notice that the lack of single pilot crew resource management is the number one, right? Doing little things like having your checklist done before reporting points, right? Being configured, knowing actually how to fly your airplane. Inappropriate go-around procedures, flight after extended periods of not flying, insufficient transition training, over-reliance on automation, first flight after the use of drugs. And that's just not illicit drugs, right? If you've been on painkillers after an operation, if you've been on some type of other medication, you haven't waited the appropriate half-life, our skills are down, right? And lack of aeronautical decision makings. So, I have people fight me on this one all the time. The FAA, from the loss of control workforce, said 1,000 feet for IFR operations. If you're not stabilized, you should be flying a missed approach. Should be 10 or plus knots on your airspeed, or you should be doing a missed approach. Should be on glide slope, 500 feet per minute or less in the landing configuration, or you should be going around. Now, a lot of these too, they're thinking about larger, higher performance aircrafts in this study. I get that. However, right, being stabilized early. So for VFR, they say that you should be at 500 feet. So what I teach students coming in is that you are on center line at 500 feet and fully stabilized by 300 feet, right? Don't try to cut that turn in. Be on airspeed, right? Be in that final flap configuration with runway assured, or do a go around. Who doesn't like to fly? Right? By the way, when is the only time you have to land?
You run out of gas. On fire.
Yeah, right? When you no longer have an operating engine.
Serious question though, on the go-arounds, are there any established or local go-around procedures for Pearson?
The big one is below 700 feet.
Okay.
Yep, so don't overfly 700, you know, and keep it. I usually, over the runway, I keep it at 5 until I'm established, like if it's on 2.6, the I-5, and then I climb up to 7, make my turn. If I'm going 8, 5 until I'm about a little past the airport. By the way, IFR departures for 8 is a direct turn battleground at how many feet? 600 off of 8, yeah, 700 feet the other way, just because of that Portland airspace. So just think about those go-arounds. So I'm glad you brought it up. How many people actually brief a go-around before they, during their approach? I mean, I don't mean like on the approach, I mean way out, right? When you're doing your descent checklist, right? We should be doing an airport briefing. We should be knowing our runway lengths, right? Go around procedures, we should be briefing them. Puts it into our short-term memory. If it's IFR, know your missed approach procedures and make sure you're stabilized. If not, when do I go around? If not stabilized, right? When a landing can't be made, the runway's out of service. out of service. So when he comes on, right, that happens a lot. Traffic. Yeah.
Rick, go back and please read those last 3 lines. Those deserve to be stated, especially the last line.
Make the decision early.
Yeah.
Stick to it. Changing your mind is destabilizing. I learned that from Jamie Green.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That confusion about starting a go around, but I think I can make it, and then
No.
you just die.
Yeah. I was doing my one of my early stage checks with Jamie Green. He used to be our chief pilot here, and I was a little irritated myself. And he goes, "Why are you irritated? You made a good decision. You go with it." And I have never forgotten that. Never forgotten that. What is the only bad decision we can make in aviation? Indecision. No decision at all, right? Stick with your plan. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Fly the airplane. If you do anything, aviate. Maintain control. Your arrest after descent, right? You're coming in hot. Are you going to climb or get to level power? When you have a positive rate or climb, configure your flaps, gear, etc. for climb, right? What are those procedures? You're coming in with 40 degrees of flaps, right? And you jam in full power. What's your expected performance, right? What type of pitch attitude are you going to get? One of my last live streams was on the startle response, right? I have some theories about that in emergencies, by the way. This doesn't end just because we have an operating engine, right? If you're dead sticking it in to land, right, and you're at best glide, and then you decide to throw in flaps, what's going to happen to your descent rate? Yeah, right? So if you're coming in, I don't know how you are all taught, but I was taught aim mid-field, right? That's the field that I want to go for. I'm landing mid-field because what I know when I drop all that stuff, I'm going to be way short. Then navigate, right? We're not talking yet. We're flying the airplane. And then, am I on center line, right? Am I staying below that 700 feet? Where's my turn going to be, right? How do I do the misapproach if this is IFR? Continue to the runway, right? The threshold, climb to pattern altitude. Get settled, right? Don't let a small problem become big problems. Navigate. And then lastly, that's when we communicate, right? It is the last thing. We get students, I don't know, probably we all did this, right? We did our first go around and we want to tell everybody we're on the go around. I don't know why, right? We're not stabilized, we're not in the pattern yet, and it's, quite frankly, it's nobody's business, right? That's my runway until I decide to get off of it, and if I am no longer landing, what phase of flight am I in? I'm on the upwind, right? 347, upwind, 26, right? All right. Plan, present the frequencies that you'll need, right? Have that programming, right, of the 5 Ps. Do you have your frequencies ready, especially our IFR pilots? Have you practiced missed approaches and go-arounds so that they become second nature? Seek refresher training. I can't tell you enough about IFR pilots, right? What do you do if you're on a circling approach, right? How do you do on a miss on a circling approach? Don't find out the rough way. Always train, get some wings credit. Fun fact, 2-6, displaced, night operations, right? That's why we have that displaced threshold, so that we don't hit those trees at night, right? So we go down, yep.
They changed the charge supplement in the last update.
They did.
And the third line on the remarks that was specifically referring to 4-9 operations is no longer there.
Ah,
So I don't know if that makes it now that it's
yeah, it's now displaced. It's now.
all the time.
Thank you.
That phrase is not
See,
there.
I didn't check my notams before the presentation.
It's been a month ago or so.
All right, yeah, all right. Beware strong winds on 2-6, right? That gives you a faster ground speed, creates more load if you're doing a tight turn to base. That's why you want to be stabilized, nice, gentle, no more than 30 degree turns in the pattern, right? Okay. 8s. Arrivals from usually come from the north, from Lake Vancouver, and then we literally follow the railroad tracks until you are online. This is where being stabilized becomes a little funnier, because we're not directly on center line on 8 just because of the geometry. What I usually figure is 400 feet by the I-5 works out the best. If I'm 400 feet by the I-5, I know that I'm stabilized and I can make that landing. And then beware strong winds from the south. We get a vicious risers and sinkers off that area. You're coming off of a lot of concrete, and you come over 800 feet of grass. We have some vortex effects with the land bridge, with the new buildings from the railroad berm. South winds, be careful at this airport. Know your personal minimums. I learned that I was a private pilot student, and we had an instructor working with the CFI candidates, and the winds were like, oh, they're not at the crosswind component. And they're like, we ain't flying. That's a south wind. Remember that. Right? Okay, so 8, right? Follow the railroad tracks. Railroad tracks are charted. This is following them in, and this is where, when we come over downtown, we want our students to be lower than 700 feet. And that's just to help with the TCAST and all that. So there's a little magic of when you start pulling power. Typically, I'm usually at Burnt Bridge, the creek where you can see all the power lines going out off the distance before the water tower, about 4th Plain Bridge, if you know the local geometry, the local area. And that's when I start pulling the power, start coming configured. I'm usually turning in around 700 feet. I'm shooting about 400 feet for the I-5, and then being stabilized and always ready for a go around on 8. Yep.
So is it common practice then to land straight in for 8 because of the shape of the CIFRA, as opposed to not being able to overfly?
Say that again.
If you're going to be coming in to land runway 08, is it common practice to land straight in?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would never, pilots do.
I'm just looking at that arrow.
Yeah. Oh, no. That's the extent. We call that extended base to final. So we're following, and then once we start hitting that area, we're literally following the railroad tracks in.
Okay.
Yeah. And now we have a nice tight little window, a couple hotels.
But you're not entering the downwind on the 45.
No.
Either, right?
No. There are times that I will, and I'll show you where that would be. Yeah.
With different personal limits to
Mhm.
what you accept for a downwind departure, or landing rather, and following flow from PDX, do you ever get into a situation here, I'm not familiar so much here, with a situation where some planes are landing one direction and you're trying to follow flow going the other direction?
Yeah, it happens often. Yeah, and sometimes it has to be, right? We've seen PDX take 15-knot tailwinds. I'm not doing that, right? But at the other time, I see the flow of traffic because there's no wind here, but you know that it's favoring something, right? It's 2 knots, right? And the windsock got in that direction, right? That's when hey, can't we change up the flow here? But it becomes more of an issue with 8 that we get more of our TCAS issues, and I would recommend going to a pilot controller on that. And really, it's not the north runway that becomes an issue. It's the south runway operation. It has to deal with just the geometry of TCAS systems. It's just a peculiarity. Once again, just fly a normal pattern. Now, we do get an area where people are practicing, doing their practice, and they'll usually go past like Smith Tower and all that and then start coming in. So this approach still creates some uncertainty, right? So we need to be communicating. That's why you hear a lot of people doing a 360, right? So they're coming in, there's downwind traffic. This allows them to do a 360 and then recover their approaches.
You're saying that, like, essentially the pattern people have right away because they can't go anywhere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be true for any arrivals, right?
Yeah.
Kind of established. Yeah.
They can't even give you a courtesy of, I'll wait for you, kind of.
Yeah.
Because they've got no place to go.
They have no place to go. Yeah. Transition arrivals. You always will be on flight following to get that, right? I mean, you're already talking with and just say, hey, I'm going to Pearson, right? And they're usually going to say, fly over PDX. That's that, I believe it's Blazer. From the south, you'll fly over the PDX tower. From the east, you need to request. I just know this. It seems like every time we come from Hood River, right? And I don't request it. They say, go direct battleground. I don't want to go all the way out to battleground. Okay, I like to fly. It's more time, right? And do that. But because approach, in my understanding, is not necessarily going to give you that transition. They're going to try to get you there without ever talking to PDX, right? That's their job. And it's probably better. And then avoid straight in to 2.6, please. Please. I can't, I'm going to yell this into the YouTube channels. Avoid 2.6. We do a lot of flight training operations. We have a lot of solo students. That is hard geometry in our tight airspace when we have to stay north of the river to figure this all out. Now, I know people will say, if able, right? You're hearing 3 or 4 aircraft in that traffic, and advisory is telling you there's a lot, you got several aircrafts in the traffic. We'll show you how to get around that. Yeah.
So is the North Bank transition, is that like a published thing, or is that just kind of local knowledge?
That's just our local knowledge, yeah. Well, that's just that you're basically getting a clearance to come through the surface area of the Charlie, and they'll tell you to stay north of the river.
For clarification, when you're talking to 119.3 Pearson advisories,
0.0.
Or 0.0.
Yep.
You are talking to a Portland approach controller.
That is surveying. No, you're talking to their tower operators.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
It's a tower controller, not an approach controller.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And that gets really tricky too, by the way, without getting into the weeds, and I'm not a controller and I don't want to kind of talk their business, but now there's like 3 levels of traffic that's now coming through that. So you have that surface area. There's times where you will fly over PDX, never talk with the tower if you're up high enough. You're staying with approach, and then they drop you in, and then you have to then do a full contact with Pearson advisory. So a little trickier. It used to be a lot cleaner, but I don't want to even get into our approach here, but there's a lot of different levels. They have a mid-level and a high level of who's operating over PDX. So on those arrivals, from the east or from the north, what we recommend is to come back in and try to do some semblance of normal patterns, right? I usually fly past the hospital, come behind Bridge Creek, and then depending upon traffic. Now, depending on how busy everything is, I fly to the lake, right? Why not? Fly to the lake. Yeah. But just let everybody know. Now, oftentimes they're going to cut you loose right here, right? But yeah, you can stay here. It's not like you're busting Charlie. They're just releasing you to fly predictably to get into Pearson, right? But they want to get you off the screens and to do that. So there's, but what we don't want to do, like, don't join a downwind, right? Kind of fly predictably. Do not do the straight in. So, all right. Don't say Frito-Lay. No straight ins 2.6. I can hear it now. I'm going to be in the pattern. somebody's going to do that, one of you guys are going to get on the radios and say, Briggs said. Great. Okay. IFR, a couple of years ago, we got a new approach. There is, I think, IFR operations in our airspace will always kind of have some contention. We used to have an LDA that would come, it was actually the ILS of the, was it 10 left. Kind of a fun approach, brought you really close to those power lines. This one was developed to really come off of the battleground VOR. So it starts way out here over Parkside, right, Goheen area. And then it just brings you right in down here. Now, the minimums are really low. And I know one of our other FAA safety team reps on the field wanted me to specifically say, even though that approach allows you to come down at 700 feet, have some personal minimums like 1,000, right? This is not the airspace to be kind of coming in hard IFR. Yeah.
Is there a way to get that as a practice approach? Because when I asked at one of these seminars, he kind of chuckled and said, the
RNAV, yeah. No, not for a true practice. They will probably never, I wouldn't say never. That's not my call. I know you want to do that. However, realize that they are shutting down arrivals and departures off of PDX, and that a missed approach puts you through the Charlie. It takes you all the way out to Galera. You got to talk to about 6 different people, 6 different radio frequency changes to get that done.
I was just wondering if there's
Yeah.
a secret to getting it.
So what you can do, yeah, is to ask, hey, I would like to do the approach visually. And what that will allow you to do is just to come in here and then they usually hand you off at battle to contact advisory, and you come in here and you do it knowing that you are not flying the mist. Yeah, so that way I'll do that a lot. I usually round that off of my 3. I come off the RNAV off of Scappoose and I request it, and I kind of get it vectored in and kind of do that, right? Which brings us up to that point where, 700 feet, low, right? So 1,000, kind of think of it more as like almost like a special VFR, right? Clear clouds type of operation. Just because we know we can't see the airport, right? It sits in this little hollow, so you'll never be able to see it. 700 feet, if you're coming in, and you're still low, you don't have a lot of options, right? And there's a lot of obstacles. So try to have a higher minimums. 1,000 is a good one. You'll notice that when it brings you in, let me go back. It brings I don't know how you guys act at ACDEP. I know that I read a thing years and years ago when I was in instrument training that these were never supposed to be sounded out, like with a name, but then everybody does. But this is right here at that corner of that airspace. So it really sets you up for a 45 for 8 or an extended base to final for 2.6. Kind of follow that line off your GPS, right? You have a GPS anyways. You just are following that will bring you right in. So a little trick. I do want to just double check one thing off this email that I had on the approach to make sure I am remembering everything. Yeah, so we got that. Good. Any questions on that? So we do still have the approach. We've had, I think the last person that I knew who actually flew it hard IMC had a 30-minute hold out there. So yeah. So check your fuel planning there, right? There are other ways to get in IFR that are probably a little better, but even though I'm an IGI, I'm not a double I, and it's probably not the appropriate time to talk about those other options. But what I will say is what I said before. We have fantastic controllers in the Portland approach area, fantastic control operators. talk with them. Use plain language, tell them what you need, and they're going to do everything you can to do it, right? So remember, Pearson pilots are proficient pilots. We have to be. Aero Maintenance is a busy flight school, right? So be kind to our students, right? Fly predictably. They get enough chaos at Scappoose. I'm probably going to get a call. I know I am. I probably shouldn't take. I should take this one down from YouTube. Fly predictably, and when in doubt, ask advisory in plain language. Right. All right. Being a school teacher, I got to do some formative assessments. Right. And I think we have a thing called a fist of 5. I think it's backwards because I think this looks powerful. This looks like you have a question. But on a rating of 0, I'm going to punch you because this was such a horrible time. Or a 5, I'm walking away with a lot of new information, or somewhere in between. You guys can do it close to your chest. Where are you guys at today for this presentation? All right, no fist. All right, okay, I appreciate it. So, any questions? None?
Yeah, Rick, I had an interesting experience about a year ago coming back into Pearson. We heard on Vancouver Lake, heard a call of caps taking off on 26. I was trying to go downwind. And I never heard the caps again until I got a ADSB alert with him right under me. And it pointed out that not everybody's following the procedures, because what he was doing was training to go to battleground. And you've also got the ODP that does the same thing. So you've got to be aware that there are people doing non-standard things.
Yep. That's a good point. You know, our instrument departure procedures is direct battleground, as every other airport within a 2-mile, of the Columbia River. So Scappoose, Camas, us, Troutdale, right? A lot of all of the departures off of PDX, right? It becomes a long wait. And we've had situations too, and this is, I had mentioned before, like 8. 26 is a little easier because you're closer to get onto the runway. But I've been held up. I'm doing the right thing. I'm waiting up in the run-up circle. I'm waiting for my hold. It's IFR weather. By the time I get done with my run-up and everything else, it's marginal or flyable, and everybody's going. And then I get my call, and there's 4 aircraft in front of me, right? And then you got to start the clock again for another 5 or 6 minutes on there. And sometimes that's just not PDX traffic. It's somebody's departing off of Camas, right? But our departures off of 8's never usually too bad. You come right out here and you go. This is the one that we cut everybody off on. So, and when you really read it, right, what does it say? You know, depart VFR, right? That's one of the options so that you can avoid some of that. So, do you think that it was a IFR departure?
No, it was a perfectly clear day. And it just reinforced to me that when you make that crosswind turn, you got to be calling and doing something that's out of the ordinary.
We have most of the issues sometimes, and we need to do a better job of getting this message out, and that's why this is kind of going on YouTube for a lot of other locations. We want people to come and visit the airport, right? But sometimes if they don't do that pre-flight planning and they don't know the procedures and they're not asking, a lot of times that's what will happen. So we are by the way, we are a maintenance provider for that program. So we get pilots all throughout the state coming in. Good point. Any other questions? Yes?
Does the chart supplement make any mention of extending downwind off of 26 to stay clear of any traffic approaching from over Vancouver Lake?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. You won't, our SFRA language, basically, I mean, it's fairly simple in terms of you have the 3 arrival points, right? You need to contact Pearson Advisory. They will give you an advisory notice, right, and when able, land with the flow and make right traffic for 26. Yeah, yeah.
Do they still have the little folders downstairs with the procedures with maps on them?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yep,
good.
yep.
Could you go over the south entry coming over PDX and where you go to before you make your turn and come back in?
Yeah, so I mean, what will happen on that transition? See if I'm on the come back one. There we go. Come right over the tower, and usually as soon as you're kind of over the river, they cut you loose. They're going to just issue a clearance to contact Pearson Advisory, and so it's you know, it's up to you how you want to do that navigating. You know, I personally teach students to get past and kind of come on the backside of the hospital, the big building out there, which you need to watch out for too, because they have a lot of medvac flights into that area.
So that's the Kaiser Hospital?
It's Peace Health. Yeah, Peace Health. Yeah, it's right off of Mill Plain. If you depart off of here, it's kind of right behind the water tower. So it's kind of located about right here. Yeah. So there's the Burnt Bridge Creek, where the power lines are coming into the Bonneville, are about right here coming through. And that's, you just give yourself some room.
You just kind of follow the power lines up and around.
Yeah.
To your about 3 miles north or something?
Yeah,
3 miles?
yeah.
Okay.
And you know, and this is, you know, it's to scale, but not really to scale too, right? Just come across and then start making your way back in. So.
You said you could also take it to the lake?
Yeah, a lot of times just fly back out over the lake and come in normally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Just watch for people.
Yeah, just watch for people.
Yeah.
Same thing like when I come off the like the Salmon Creek reporting point, the freeway split. We follow the freeway. Then if I'm landing 8, I still just join the railroad tracks. We have a lot of people too that come to the lake off that area. Back in the day, we used to use the fairgrounds as a reporting point, but the fairgrounds is harder to see than a freeway split. So we always usually try to get charted areas that anybody could figure out. Good. You guys are waiting for that barbecue, huh? All right. Please remember, this is why I became a flight instructor. Member of the FAST team is utilizing the Wings Proficiency Program. We do a fantastic job of getting people in to take seminars, right? And then we never get the flight activities, right? So make sure you're out there flying regularly with a CFI. My shtick is in an industry where a switch is $1,000 for an airplane. We don't seem to have a couple $100 to fly with an instructor every year, right? Yeah, right. So yeah, because you're paying for the $1,000 switch. Yeah. So anyways, get out there. There's a lot of things that we can do in terms of those trainings. The phase of wings counts as a flight review. The operations to go out and do some things for just proficiency in flying, so we're just not doing a milk run. I always ask these, who are my commercially rated pilots in here? All right. For those of you, what's your name?
John Story.
John. When's the last time you did a chandelle?
On purpose?
On purpose. I asked that question once about stalls, right? I had a thing where, like, stand up if you've ever stalled an airplane, and somebody asked, like, on purpose? That's where we're going. Right, remember that, right? Like that proficiency training, if you're a commercial pilot, you should be able to still do chandelles. You should be able to do 8s on pylons or lazy 8s, right? That's how it's your job to maintain your currency. So the wings is a great thing on that. I know that flight reviews can count as wings if it's a properly done flight review. So get out there and fly with your instructors. Okay, that's all I got. That's my shtick. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you guys soon. I got to figure out how to stop this live recording.